This is Souliloqy Radio, the podcast that discusses philosophy, spirituality, consciousness, and paths to a positive lifestyle from a non-theistic perspective. So sit back and open your mind. Welcome back to another episode of Souliloqy Radio. I'm your host, as always, Otis Ayala. And this episode, titled Losing My Religion. There is no way that we can continue to talk about the story of my personal journey and talk about the spiritual aspects of life unless we cross this necessary bridge. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a tough episode, because when has talking about religion ever been easy? See, it's like walking on eggshells in clown shoes and juggling flaming anvils. Not only is everything going to break, but damn, the house is going to get set on fire too. Now, before I tell my story, there has to be a proper foundation laid down, because talking about religious beliefs is difficult to begin with, and even more so when you try to explain a radically different view than others around you commonly have. But this is a necessary talk. For so many people out there who have abandoned religion, for those currently struggling with religion, and even for those still in a religious following, so that we can all attain a greater understanding. Please, if you are in any of those groups, especially the latter, please keep an open mind as always. Think of it like this. If I asked you to walk through a hallway where someone just farted, and there was a really good chance there was a $50 bill on the floor going through that hallway, would you do it? Hell to the yeah, right? And these talks are the same way. You may not be crazy about the ideas being presented, but you can be rest assured that there will be some jewels of knowledge that you could pick up along the way. And this is the biggest elephant in the room. The difference in religious views can literally become an obstacle that could drive a wedge between friends and family and loved ones. And depending how deep-rooted someone's beliefs are, that wedge can become an impenetrable force field that alienates relationships. I know this. I know this personally because I've been there myself. But the conversations that are most required are usually the hardest ones, aren't they? The subject areas that grant the greatest rewards also contain the greatest fear. And who are we really if we dare not tackle these? How are we expected to grow if we don't face them? See, lots of life coaches out there will not talk about this subject in detail. And I understand it. They have a vested business interest, and it can withstand rocking a boat slightly, but not to the point that customers shun away. Well, this podcast is not that, and neither am I. This is not a business. This is not about me being your coach. This podcast is about my personal journey, the mountains and valleys I've climbed and descended into, and I've created this present mindset that I have. This is about me wanting to share what I've learned. This is about helping others gain an understanding that can lead them into their own paths and ultimately to their own freedom and liberation. And regardless of being right, wrong, or indifferent, you will never attain that level of liberation as long as you allow someone else to dictate to you what the rules of spirituality are. That is a plain as day fact. As long as someone else, not you, is defining your limitations, is defining where the walls of your box begins and end, how can you ever possibly think that you are free? Oh, you may think you're free. You may have that thought that you have free will, but that illusion only exists in the box they set up for you. See, once you try to step out of it, they yank at you with a threat of eternal damnation, right? Isn't it so? I mean, am I wrong here? But the fact is, you will never be free living under a paradigm that someone else has set up for you. If your desire is to be free, if your desire is to be liberated, then as I have always said, you need to come to the realization that not only must you escape the box, but to overstand the box and attain the realization that the box doesn't even exist. And that does not mean an end of your spirituality, but a broadening of it. Now we're going to pause for a second to pick up the jewel I just dropped back there and explain this concept of overstanding. It's one of the things I've picked up along my journeys. And I know for some of you out there, it's the first time you're hearing this. See, this comes from the Rastafarian culture, which expands on the concept of understanding. See, while understanding means to comprehend the intended meaning or significance of something, overstanding means to comprehend the thing itself and comprehend both why it is the way it is and its place and role in the grand scheme of things. Remember when I said that if you allow your mind to expand into other cultures and subjects, ways of thought, you can always pick up a jewel and take along with you. There you go. I just showed and prove. That's the point, people. Show and prove. Now back to my story of losing my religion. See, this episode is not just about my story and what I've learned along the way, but also being able to differentiate between religion and spirituality. Because these things, these ideas, these concepts, they're not mutually exclusive. You can be spiritual and not have religion. And we see a lot that you can be religious and devoid of spirituality. How, may you ask? Well, allow me to show and prove again. Let's start with the dictionary definitions. See, religion, as defined, is the belief and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a god or gods. It's also a particular system of faith and worship. Let's think about that. A particular system of faith and worship usually means a system set up with rules, leaders, people who write the rules, none of which are you. Spirituality. This is the definition of spirituality. The quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. You see that? Being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material physical things. Now, as we can see, one definition has nothing at all to do with the other. By definition alone, these are two independent concepts. So when you walk into your church in this tall building adorned with gold everywhere, does that seem like it is concerned with material things? When the collection plate gets passed around 3 times, does that seem concerned with material things? When church is over and the pastor gets in a shiny black new truck, does that seem concerned with material things? When the Catholic Church has been found guilty of not only keeping quiet about, but protecting guilty priests across various archdioceses and countries spanning decades, that boils down to running a pedophile molestation ring made possible by your tithing dollars every week. Does that seem concerned with material things? Now, I could go down this list more and more examples, but the point's made. And to go down more examples is to just go deeper into negativity, and that's not what we're here for. The fact is that all religion can be summarized in a couple of sentences. See, religion is a system of beliefs in which a deity requires your constant worship, begging and pleading, so that he may show mercy upon your pitiful soul, to grant you entrance into some afterworld kingdom instead of an eternal damnation that he created himself. And one more thing, he's bad with money, and he picks the winners of the Super Bowl. Spirituality, on the other hand, can be summarized with one word: liberation. And this doesn't mean that you no longer believe in God. I mean, it means that your concept of God changes. Your understanding of what God is and isn't evolves. Your place within the divine and the universe is realized. See, the best way to understand these different concepts is with a metaphor that I heard from Noah Rasheta. He said, in life, there's kites and there's birds. And the kites, they're beautiful, they're colorful, they come in many shapes, they can be made to look like dragons and planes and boxes. And as long as the conditions are right, they could pretty much stay up in the air indefinitely as long as the wind is blowing, and the kite itself doesn't have to spend any energy doing this. But the kite has its limitations. See, the kite always has to be tethered to the ground. If you cut that tether, the kite comes tumbling down, spiraling out of control, right? Now, think about a bird. See, birds don't need to be tethered. They can fly high, they can fly low, they can master wind currents. They can stay in the wind current without flapping their wings. They can go as high as they want. Spirituality and religion are like the kites and the birds. See, some people need that tether of religion to stay afloat. If that gets cut off, they lose their moral compass and spiral out of control. But some of us are birds, and to tether us is to limit us, to not allow us to reach our full potential. See, it's not fair to ask a bird to be a kite, but it's also not fair to ask a kite to be a bird. See, although every single one of us has a higher potential that we can reach, some people are just not ready. And to force them into being a bird can prove to be catastrophic. Some people need that tether for either moral support, recovering from bad experiences, or just something to hold on to. And nothing is wrong with that. If you need that security blanket, there's nothing wrong with that. If you need that extra moral support, there's nothing wrong with that. If religion is doing good for you and is making you a positive person and you need that in your life right now, then so be it. But some of us are different. Like we're all different. And that's okay too. See, if deep down you feel you're a bird, if deep down you yearn to fly, if the only thing holding you from doing so is fear, if the only thing holding you from doing so is the judgment of others, the judgment of your family, the judgment of your friends, your peers, I want you to start with one thing. I want you to listen carefully to me. Let go. Let go of the tether. Let go of the fear. Let go of everything holding you back. Just let go. Spread your wings and discover your true self. You're listening to Souliloqy Radio. You can find this show on any major podcast provider by going to souliloqyradio.com under the Listen Now tab and clicking on your preferred provider link. You can also find links to the YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram page. While you're there, remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And now, back to the show. All right, so now on to my personal story about how I actually lost my religion. See, I was born into a Roman Catholic family, and although we weren't super religious as some other families were, we did go to church every Sunday. So it was a very abusive household under the physical and emotional abuse of my mother and the abuse